Folks, we're lucky enough to have Dr. Nicholas DiNubile on this next Health Haven podcast, orthopedic surgeon specializing in sports medicine. Dr. Nick, you told me I could call you that. How's it going?
I'm great. How are you doing? It's great to be talking to you. We interact a lot on social media. I know you're doing great stuff out there, and again, I really appreciate you having me.
I do appreciate that, but you actually caught mine. I'm just humbled to be talking to you right now and to be following you. I saw a video of you, YouTube video, hugging Allen Iverson. Did you start off working with the 76ers?
That's funny that you found that one.
Yeah.
That one's hidden deep and away. That was the night he came back to Philly.
Right.
This is
Nuggets.
after his career, correct. Denver Nuggets came back that night, and Alan and I were very close. I was a team doc for the Sixers for about 12 or 13 years, and it started the year before we got Alan. So I met him at the combines when we go to examine all the players and see who we're going to draft. We knew we wanted him. We were thrilled to have him, but he was a kid then. I mean, he was a kid, and we became very close. And I love Allen Iverson. So, and his persona behind the scenes is so different than that person he showed to the media. He has the biggest heart in the world. He's the greatest guy. And if he would spot me or my kids, he would do that. He'd go out of his way to come over and give you, that's what he did. He came over and gave me a big hug on that night down outside the locker room. It was a special moment.
I saw that, and from everything, we see what media portrays some of these athletes as being, some people as being even, but he just seems like, and it was the way he played on the court, like he had the biggest heart. He wasn't the biggest guy, wasn't the strongest guy, but he played like he was 7'5". This guy was, he was relentless. And he showed no signs of fear. It was just amazing. So I could imagine that what you're saying is exactly what he was. Some guy that really kind of always stuck to his roots and always was humble.
He was a warrior. He was a warrior, and he was picked. I think USA Today picked either him or Brett Favre as, I think they tied, or one was first, one was second, as the toughest athletes ever. And I would agree. He never wanted to come out of the game. He played every game as if it was his last at 120%. Even if we were losing by 20 points with 2 minutes to go, you wouldn't know it to look at him. And that's just, you don't see that in sport today, to see that kind of. And you're right, he'd crash into Shaq like he was bigger than Shaq.
Yeah.
Like he was going to take Shaq down, and he would bounce off Shaq and hit the ground
and get right
back up. This guy was
up.
bruised and hurt. But he learned, one of the things we learned with taking care of those kind of athletes is that he always wanted to know the difference between hurt and harm, and I think that's real important. I think as a team doc or as a sports medicine doc, if you can assure somebody they're not going to hurt themselves further or do harm to their body, there's some things you can play through. So I always have that red light, green light, yellow light for athletes that if it's a flashing yellow light, like, hey, okay, it's going to hurt a little, you're not going to do any more harm. If you can put up with it and perform to what you think is adequate for you, then go for it. But if I think you're ever going to put yourself in harm's way, then you get the red light, and you can't play on that. You cannot play, and that's what a lot of these kids don't get sometimes when we see them. That I don't want they think we're being the bad guy for keeping them out, but it's really, we're thinking of their long-term health.
Yeah.
These kids only see what's coming this week, you know what I mean, or this day.
So we have.
So Alan.
Yeah. Just real quick, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but so you have two segments. You sort of. What I'm hearing is you deal with the professional athlete that when you see that yellow light, I guess it's maybe a different situation, right? Because they're professional athletes. They're the top athletes in the world, and then maybe they could extend themselves. Their yellow light, they're a Lamborghini. They have enough speed to get through that yellow light. And I guess when you're dealing with the youth coming up, maybe they don't have the same speed in their vehicle yet to get through that yellow light. Is that something you have to case-by-case basis?
Well, part of it's that, and they're not, kids, especially younger kids that are still growing, they are not just little adults. They have different bodies, growth plates, and you're thinking of their long-term health. You don't want to put anything at risk for further damage, because they're not playing in the NBA finals or they're not in the Olympics. And at that point, you sit down with serious athletes and they make a decision that they're willing to take certain risks. We had that with like Eric Snow when we were in the finals. He had a stress fracture in his ankle. It was being held by a screw.
Mm-hmm.
the chances are, and the fracture wasn't healed, that screw could have broken. But this was his one chance, and he figured if the screw breaks, take it out and put another one in.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not, I'm willing to take that risk. But that's a professional athlete in the NBA finals.
Right.
And every kid thinks that they can go in with that kind of risk, so we can't allow that. The other thing, you as a trainer, and especially if you're dealing with the adult population,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of aches and pains with fitness, right?
Yep.
And it's sometimes hard to decide, is this just something that is okay to work through, or do we modify your activity, or do we really need to shut you down with that?
Right.
Because,
Absolutely.
I myself, I'm an athlete, I'm a pretty high-level tennis player, but I'm an old guy, and I've got a lot of beat-up body parts, and I know what, if I'm out there and my knee's a little sore, I expect that. I'm not going to stop for that.
Yes.
But there's other things I know that I can't play through if it happens to me. And
Yes.
the same thing with my fitness programs. If something is hurting when I'm doing it, it's not the no pain, no gain of muscle strengthening. You might have a joint, you might have a rotator cuff tearing, you might have a disc herniating. So it's that no pain, no gain may not apply in that situation.
Yeah, that cliche, I threw that out the window a long time ago. I do like an assessment with a modification, and that's almost every second I'm dealing with somebody, a client, or even myself. Again, I'll be 42 in a couple of weeks. I'm not the young 22-year-old guy anymore that could just go out and squat whatever it is, 400 and deadlift 400. I've had to modify everything. I've incorporated more tensile strength type of exercises, trying to incorporate more yoga, mixing up the CrossFit, doing the HIIT training, still using resistance, but definitely the portfolio has grown as I've gotten older.
That's great. And that's around the age of 40. Your body starts to change, and it's
Yes.
like gray hairs and wrinkles. We all get them, and in your inside, you get these little, what I call, fault lines or weak links that we all have, and they are prone to problems. So if you can identify those, that's where assessment comes in, and learning to listen to your body. Even my good friend, Arnold Schwarzenegger, if you've read any of my books, that he's written the foreword for my main book, my main framework book, my bestseller that I did called Framework. He says you can't treat your body, back then I remember him saying at 40 you can't treat your body the way you did at 30. And then at 50 he said you can't treat now Arnold's going to be 70 this summer, next month. Unbelievable how fit he looks at this point.
He still looks great.
But he trains differently. He really can't do it. He can't, like he says, you cannot punish your body like you did back then, because you're going to break down. So you got to be smart with what you do, and balance is important. You described yoga and other things. Most of us don't have balanced fitness programs. It's not, you don't have that equal amounts of strength, flexibility, aerobic, core. You tend to favor one thing and overdo it, or like a lot of guys, they favor the mirror muscles. The stuff you see in the mirror. They're doing biceps, they're doing pecs, and they create imbalances around their body that then set them up for injuries.
Absolutely. And and I love what you're saying, because balance and stability, I try to incorporate as much as possible in any demographics. But I've also incorporated more and more exercises which kind of bridge the muscles, the joints, and the bones with the central nervous system. So you want to have all of that operating at the same time. And people sometimes think I'm crazy. They come in there like, well, I just kind of want to drop some pounds and look good in the mirror, good in the mirror and good in this bikini. And I always try to tell people, you should be training at any age group. At any age group, you should be training long-term, functional training, something that, like a diet plan. I don't give diet plans. I want long-term nutritional habits. So you can sustain it, things that are sustainable, that can be modified and then remodified, but sustainable programs.
Absolutely. You're doing them a favor if you can convince them of that. And you described, and life is not 1 and 2 dimensional. You're not going to get, in the gym it's mostly 1 or 2D workouts. I have an article I wrote. I think I blog for Huffington Post, so if you go on Huffington Post and just search my name, you'll find a lot of my stuff. But It's called "Are You 3D Fit?" And I learned because I had gotten away from tennis for many years, and I was going to the gym regularly. And you think you're in good shape, and then I have kids later in life, and you go out and try to do things. You go out and try to do things with them, and you realize your hand-eye coordination isn't there, your agility isn't there, your balance isn't there, neuromuscular. But it all can come back. You can retrain that stuff at any age. And
Absolutely.
so me getting back on, messing around on the skateboard with my son, or taking up tennis again, which I did, and I've gone to pretty high level. And I'm a member of the United States Professional Tennis Association now. I could coach if I wanted, and someday I might go on and get my pro card. But it comes back, and that's the great thing about the body. But you got to keep using it, and I think it's wise to make sure you're balanced with all the things we talked about: strength, stability, core, aerobic, but also the neural, the 3D balance, agility, proprioception is the big word for it. It's like your internal GPS that your body has, an internal GPS that you can improve.
They're all connected.
For sure.
Absolutely, they're all connected. Where do you see the future of fitness going? Knowing what you've known, having your background, you've been a professor, University at Penn. You've worked in the NBA with top-level athletes. You yourself, you're at a different age group where you're gaining all of your abilities kind of back and reprogramming yourself. Where do you see the trend going?
That's a tough call. I think the basics are always going to be there. It's, we have a small percentage of population that have really bought into this and are very fit, and it's great to see these people and very active. But when you look at the real numbers in our country, we're not doing well.
Right.
Sedentary. In fact, I just saw on USA Today, and I posted it. I think that we are amongst one of the least active. They count steps, and they can use your phone to measure steps, and it's one of the biggest worldwide study of how active different populations are. And our average is awful.
Yeah.
I mean, our average in this country is, I think it was 3,000 or 4,000 steps a day, and that's average. There's some people who aren't even, they sit on the couch all day, then they go lie on their bed and watch TV at night, then they sleep all night, and then the next day it's, repeat.
Yeah.
They never, they're sedentary all the time, and we know that's as dangerous for your health as smoking now.
Yep.
So, I think that the real fitness, the balanced fitness, the great fitness has hit a certain part of the population, but I would like to see it start reaching other elements of our population and populations that don't have the ability to join gyms and, inner city kids and, poor folk. It's just, we're not doing well, and that's where I would like to see the future to where we just get people moving more, and that's a start. That's not the end goal. If you can just get people off their butt and stop being sedentary, you've improved their health. But once you get them moving, I know my own patients, if I can even just get them walking, to me that's the hook. And then if I see that they've bid on that and that they're kind of hooked, then you try to move them to more balanced fitness. They need to be doing strength training. They need to stay flexible, especially as they age. They need cardiovascular health. So,
definitely.
but and there's always going to be fads. Who knows what the next fad is going to be? You and I wish we knew, right? Because we would get in on that. But the basics are always the same. The fads change, and I've never been a fad-based fitness guy. I like to do my own thing, and I know what I need to do, and I don't catch up with what's that new thing that's going on.
Yeah.
But if it's what motivates some people to keep going, then I can't criticize it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think
I don't know.
I think what you're doing, again, with your book, the framework, and the stuff you post, and you have the history working with these athletes, and you have the history of being a surgeon. I think you giving the information out is doing your part, and that's all we could do, I guess. We could do all parts. So you are doing that.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And I work with I'm ACE, the American Council on Exercise, their chief medical advisor, and I've done all their courses for advanced certification for musculoskeletal, and I think that's critical especially for the fitness professionals out there, if you're working with the adult population, like we said earlier, after the age of 40, it's a different body, and if you don't find those weak links, they're going to find you. We all have them, so. In all my books cover this. Every book, whether it's the original framework or the one I did for the knee, the shoulder, the lower back, to find that weak link, and then you have three choices. When you find that fault line in your body, you can resolve it, which would be great. If you could get rid of it with some therapy or with surgery or whatever and have it back to normal, that's great. But that doesn't happen for everyone. So if you can't get rid of it, you need to modify your activities in a way that not only avoid irritating it, but maybe even fortify it. So it's never going to be normal again. You have a partial tear in your rotator cuff, but you strengthen everything around it, you change your workouts, and it's a good one. And if you can't do that, the third thing you do is you're going to have to work around it. You just can't work through it. You have to work around it. So trying to teach the personal trainers and the fitness professionals to identify these things in the adult population. Because, when a 55-year-old comes in, they look at you and say, I want to look like you. The worst thing you could do is probably put them on the program you're doing, especially if you're a 20-year-old that's indestructible. You know what I mean? And that I see that a lot in my office where people come in and they say, oh, that trainer wasn't good, or what, it was a bad program. It wasn't a bad program. It just wasn't the right thing for whatever that ailment you had was. So it's a shame that, and then when you lose those people, if they get hurt with training, they sometimes never come back to it. They're like my parents, that generation, where not only were they not active, but if they ever went out and did something and were sore the next day, they would never go back and do it again.
Yeah, they stopped.
Unlike us, where we just go back for more. So it's important.
We're living in a time where the information is becoming more available, and again, I'm super humbled to have you just talk about these things, because I do run across a lot of trainers, and I don't want to put them in a box, but there's some trainers out there who are young trainers, 21, 22, they're getting introduced to the whole industry, and they get an online certification, which they get in a couple of minutes. They don't go to NASM or ACE or these accredited certifications, and people are getting hurt left and right. And I hate seeing it, but that's what's happening. I think, again, your book, like just the framework and all the information that you provide and experience, could help one or two, which in turn could help 2 or 4 and 8 and so on and so forth. So.
Right, and I'd recommend the framework books, any of the series, to anyone. I think they're good. Maybe I would update the first one of these days, but it's still pretty. It's very current. It was so ahead of its time when it came out. It was a bestseller, I'm probably going to do one on the female frame. I think that's an interesting thing. We see so many vulnerabilities and injuries that I think are preventable, and I don't think we're doing a lot of our young female athletes a favor here. I think we're doing them a disservice, throwing them out there, competing in these high-level sports. The injury levels are just way too high. We got to do things a little differently. I want them to be fit. I want them to be active, but I think they probably need more strength. They need more neuromuscular training than your average guy, because their ACL injuries are 5 to 7 times more likely to happen than a male.
Yeah,
the concussions are different. The concussions that they're getting, whether it's neck weakness or other differences in the male-female brain, I don't know the reason, but we're just seeing way too many, injuries that have lifetime consequences on these young female athletes, and I really think we can do better. So that's where you might see me banging on a drum going forward. I don't know.
The framework too.
Yes.
The framework too. That's the title. Dr. Nick, before we get out of here, can you give us all your social media handles and or websites that people can follow you on?
Absolutely. My website is just drnick.com. It's drnick.com. And I guess Twitter is probably the easiest. It's Dr. Nick USA. It's DRNICK USA. And always happy to interact with people and always open to thoughts and ideas. So, let's keep the conversation going, as they say.
Folks, this is another Health Haven podcast. Go and follow Dr. Nick.